Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this Bitcoin Whitepaper event. We are recording this on October 31st, 2023. It is block 814,722, and the current exchange rate of Bitcoin is $34,584 US dollars per Bitcoin. So this event is being sponsored by Finny21 to commemorate, honor, and celebrate the 15th anniversary of Satoshi unveiling the Bitcoin Whitepaper. So Finny21 is a full-service Bitcoin consulting firm. It was established at block 801408, and it's basically a team of hardcore Bitcoiners who are consulting and on a mission to accelerate the transition to scarce money. And they do that by helping individuals, companies, family offices understand, acquire, and custody Bitcoin. So finny21.com is their website if you want to get in touch. Finney after Hal Finney. My name is Caribou. I have the honor of hosting today's session. The video of this event is going to be posted on YouTube, and the audio is going to be uploaded as a podcast, both at Bitcoin Stoa, S-T-O-A. So if you enjoy this event and you want to support the project, you can zap Finny21 on Nostr, or you can also boost sats to the podcast using Fountain. And all the funds that they receive on Fountain or through zaps that use the message 1031 are going to be put towards our next event on January 3rd, 2024, which is the 15th anniversary of the Genesis block. So, all right, let's get into it. The Bitcoin White Paper is a 9-page, 2,736 word document with 12 sections. It was written in academic style to explain how Bitcoin would work and the problems that Bitcoin could solve. And with this creation, Satoshi Nakamoto initiated a revolution for humanity. So through a piece of software, Satoshi effectively birthed a discovery that is slowly but surely reshaping the world and gradually repricing everything in a truthful unit of account, which I think is duly needed. Satoshi created he offered an exit basically from the fiat experiment that is stealing people's time and creating extraordinary amounts of suffering around the world. And he began a peaceful revolution that's lowering our collective time preference and bringing humanity into alignment with truth, and granting every human on Earth undeniable property rights and a connection to the digital trade network within the internet economy. So it's a pretty significant thing despite being a 9-page paper. It really is quite amazing to witness how profoundly this tool is influencing humanity in so many different areas. And today is really about celebrating Bitcoin and honoring the significance of how much better the world is becoming with Bitcoin. I found 3 interesting facts about the white paper, which were curated by Pete Rizzo from Bitcoin Magazine. One is that the Bitcoin white paper was published exactly 490 years to the day after Martin Luther's published his 95 Theses, which sparked a revolution to separate church and state. And I find it interesting, the timing, considering Satoshi's paper essentially separated money and state. Fun fact number 2, the word Bitcoin only appears twice in the entire white paper, which looking back, I'm like, I didn't believe it, but then I looked at it and it's actually true. And the last interesting thing is that in his early emails, Satoshi wrote that he had actually been working on the code for Bitcoin 2 years before the white paper was released. He actually wrote specifically, I had to write the code before I could convince myself. And I think that's like such a beautiful builder's mindset that I think is embodied well by Bitcoiners and sort of by anyone who's aligning with Bitcoin. So today, it's 4:20 right now. Tried to tee this up, so I started exactly at 4:20, so mission accomplished. We have 3 really thoughtful and knowledgeable Bitcoiners who have joined us to share their insights on the white paper and on self-custody. So very grateful to have you 3 gentlemen here and just really excited to absorb your wisdom. The first half, the speakers are going to share their insights on the Bitcoin white paper for 10 minutes each. And the second half of this session, speakers are going to drop some knowledge bombs about self-custody. So super grateful to have you, Luke, Dan, and Santosh here and for everyone listening. So our first speaker is Luke Broyles, and he is a Bitcoin advisor, a filmmaker, and although he's humble and will deny it, he has this uncanny and very unique ability to actually speak about Bitcoin in a profound way. And it's just, from the first time I heard him speak, it's very impressive. So Luke, thanks for being here. And the stage is all yours for the next 10 minutes to share your insights on the white paper.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro. It's hopefully it's a little bit humility, but a lot of it too is just like everyone puts the bar so high. It's like you know, um, but yeah, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the invite, because yeah, it's fun. Frankly, it snuck up on me. October 31st snuck up on me, this year, just because the world's going so fast. I feel like time on Bitcoin is radically different than the rest of the world. So I was like, oh yeah, today's white paper day. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's in my mind, I think of January 3rd more as the big day, but really today's just as much a big day, I guess. It's a um big pre-day before the real day, January 3rd, I guess. But anyway, yeah, so the white paper, what does it mean to me? I think to be what is so cool about the white paper is just the simplicity. Like you said, it's only 2,700 words long, it's only 9 pages long, one of which is citations. There's only 8 people in the citation. So, well, 8 citations, not 8 people, but yeah, just the simplicity is so elegant. I made this post yesterday, about the difficulty adjustment. I know a lot of financial advisors, and a lot of them are into Bitcoin and they're actually understanding it. A lot of them don't understand Bitcoin, and a lot claim they've researched Bitcoin but don't know what the difficulty adjustment or don't know there's simple things about Bitcoin. And to me, the beauty of the white paper is that it's so simple that it's like it's very difficult to have the excuse to learn nothing about Bitcoin, know nothing about Bitcoin, because it's literally 8 pages long. It's technical, and but it's like there are pictures and it's in pretty simple language. And obviously, just because it's 8 pages, it's probably pretty dense 8 pages for most people, especially those that aren't into computers. But to me, it's the simplicity that's the elegance, right? I liked, I forget the quote you said, um, on the intro, but it was a quote Satoshi had of, I couldn't believe it until I wrote the code, or I had to write the code first because I wouldn't believe it. And I think a lot of us feel the same way. Probably a lot of people listening out there feel the same way, that it's like it's really hard to believe until like you see it and you use it and you get used to it and your brain gets used to it and you're like, oh yeah, I mean, how do we ever see anything different? And I think in retrospect, it's so obvious that that's exactly what it had to be. In retrospect, it had to be so simple, so clean, so elegant, and so obvious that it was unbelievable. I mean, frankly, it's like the Zoom call right now. I mean, we have all four of us. I don't even know where, you know, the other three are right now. People listening to this are probably all over the world. For my job at the Bitcoin Advisor, I consult with clients all over the world. Like I've already talked to people from 5, 6 different countries around the world today. It's just like I use Zoom all the time now. I use email all the time. I use my phone all the time. I use my car all the time. And all these things to me are so simple. It's just like, I don't know how any of this works. I don't know how Zoom works. Like I know the basics of how the internet works. I know the basics of how my car works. It's like, I'm no mechanic, but it's just amazing to me that how simple all of these innovations are, and they build on top of each other. And to me, that's the beauty of the white paper. That's the beauty of Bitcoin, that it's so simple that once you see it, it's like impossible to unsee. But until you've seen it, it's basically impossible to believe. Even with Satoshi, which is why I like that quote of how before he could convince himself and therefore convince the world, he had to write the code and actually see that it was possible. And I think that goes to the whole engineering perspective, or Sailor's metaphors, or the engineering mindset when it comes to Bitcoin. When I was in Colorado, I went to Colorado back in September, and I think it was like the first 5 people um, I saw there were all engineers, right? So Preston Fish was one of them, but then like the other 3 or 4 were all also engineers, and it was just this weird thing because like, wait, we're at a Bitcoin event. Why is this like an engineering event? It was so funny because I was like the one guy that wasn't an engineer there, but it was like, again, in retrospect, it's so obvious because the best engineering solution is the simplest one, right? You don't need the complexity. The I mean, I forget who said it, but it's a common phrase, I guess, in engineering, that the the best part is one that doesn't exist, right? So anyway, I think I made that point about, to me, that's what's so great about the white paper. It's just the simplicity, um, of how it works, and everything else has been atop of that. And I think that's a common criticism too of what makes it so hard for people to understand, because it's so simple, because it's so obvious. It feels like it's a different world. It's like there's the Bitcoiners and there's the rest of the world, right? It's like we feel like we're in our little world because we've seen the obvious thing that 2 + 2 = 4, and the rest of the world is like, if we just change the numbers and we can get different. It's just like you're using letters. It just makes no sense, right? But I think what most people are going to go through when it comes to learning about Bitcoin is realizing that it has to be that way, and it has to be in that layered way over time, and that this human element of managing the math equation we call monetary policy is just completely redundant. It's completely not needed. We don't need humans to do that. You don't need humans to do math equations. If you just build a little machine that can do those calculations for you, call it a calculator. I mean, forget the humans, right? It's just this unnecessary engineering component, and that's not an anti-human statement. It's just the reality that if you can build a machine that does something that humans can do better than humans, it's like it's the obvious thing to do, and that's like all we've ever done, right? We don't have to farm anymore. We had our oxen do it. We don't have to make our own paper. We just have machines do it. I mean, likewise, I don't have to exit my room right now and walk 1,000 miles to you, then 1,000 miles to you, then 1,000 miles to you, and then relay this message. Like I don't have to get on my feet, speak with you three, and then speak to the dozens, hundreds of thousands of people listening to this across the world. Like we just build a machine that does it for us. So anyway, I think that's what's cool about the white paper is just that its modesty and its simplicity, just black and white, reflects that. You mentioned the 95 Theses. Martin Luther, I posted about that right before I came on here. With my 95 reasons why Bitcoin instead of political currency, and um, to me it's poetic in a certain sense. It's interesting. It's ironic. And I think that's the hope for me is that we can have all these reasons as to why this is better, but really, again, boiling it down to that fundamental base layer, I think it's just cut humans out of the loop. What was the problem Martin Luther was making? What was the point that Martin Luther was making? He was making the point that having humans in between man and God as like this mediator of like, oh, you have to pay to atone for your sins, like it was completely not just inefficient from an engineering perspective, but morally, theologically, spiritually wrong. And in a strange way, it's a metaphorically similar thing here, where it's like, if you're going to have between humans and math, it's just humans are redundant. Don't have humans do what only God can do, and don't have humans be monetary gods where we can just say, I can manifest monetary energy out of thin air, give it to other people across the planet, and force it with the barrel of a gun, which is my form of monetary backing or my form of energy backing. It's like, humans aren't God. That's what it comes down to. And I think the beauty of Bitcoin is reflecting that humans shouldn't do math better than math can do itself.
So good. That was brilliant. Thank you for staying on time. Um, so our second speaker here to share his insights on the white paper is Dan Ostermeyer. And Dan is an emergency medicine doctor and a student of Bitcoin. I had the honor of interviewing Dan recently on the Bitcoin Stoa. Actually, no, I think it was on the Bitcoin Stoa. And actually, subtle story about this. When I did the podcast with Dan, he had mentioned that I think it was during your medical school training, you took a weekend off to study the Bitcoin white paper. And you may not have done it for the whole weekend, but I remember you explicitly saying that. And I was like, part of me was like, shit, I haven't taken a weekend to study the white paper. I need to do this. And so part of this was my excuse to like really research the white paper as part of this sort of event. And my hope is to inspire people to actually honor this day in future by reading the white paper. I'm going to read it. I'm going to make a tradition to read the white paper on 10/31, October 31st every year, because the first time I read it, like basically the recent time I read it was the first time I read it, even though I've read it a few times before, because it's the first time I read it with the knowledge that I have today versus like 3 or 4 years ago. I had nowhere near the depth of knowledge and understanding of how elegant this actually is. And now when I read it, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's even more incredible. So Dan, thank you for inspiring this event. Thanks for being here. And it's all yours for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. I also love how you've nailed almost like the theses of Martin Luther to your stairwell behind you. That's great as well. Luke, that was awesome. I echo everything Luke just said, but one of the things I really want to sort of hone in on when I read the white paper for this event again, and thinking about our current environment, the macro environment, the political environment, is that and then also just thinking back to Satoshi. If you haven't read the Book of Satoshi, it's one of the best books written, at least I think, on Bitcoin, which is just a collection of his writings from Bitcoin Talk and some of his email correspondence that has been released. But you get an idea of the author when you read the white paper, and you also get an idea when you read other works that he's produced in terms of his writings online, and you realize that he was an incredibly intentional individual. I'm just going to, refer to, the person Satoshi as an individual, just because we only know his one voice or her one voice. And you realize that nothing is accidentally written. And when you read this white paper, you realize very quickly that Satoshi understood the gravity of the invention that he was creating. He understood, one, that he was removing, if this was a successful system that was adopted, this protocol that only has to simply outlive him and other people in order to have success. Protocols never die, they just become forgotten. And I think he realized, as creating a protocol, a monetary protocol, that in the process it would demonetize many other monetary protocols. We operate on a fiat monetary protocol in all the countries that we live on. The biggest monetary protocol is the US dollar based monetary protocol. It touches other protocols like the euro dollar based monetary protocol. And I'm almost certain that while creating such a system, Satoshi realized that this protocol must be robust enough, and also he must be aware of the system of which it was born into, because very early on in his white paper, and he has an entire section dedicated to this, he talks about the particular attack in terms of the longest chain attack or the reorganizational attack. And he understood the adversarial environment that such a protocol would have to exist in. One, this is just certain to all decentralized protocols, is that since there is no centralized protector of the protocol, it's by nature in an adversarial environment. But more importantly, by being a monetary protocol, and one that would naturally take value from other protocols, there needed to be a few things that were very intrinsic to it. One, there had to be good incentives for individuals who were engaging in it, especially in the beginning, to bootstrap it, and then later on during the potential they fight you phase to continue to support it. And so there's an entire section dedicated simply to the incentive of running a node. In that case, the original node was a miner, so mining in both an adversarial environment and also being able to verify transactions in an adversarial environment. So he understood that there was going to need to be a way to incentivize people to at least have one or two nodes on the network at all times, because no matter how adversarial various actors could be to the protocol, as long as there's one node, the entire protocol can be rebootstrapped. As long as there's one miner that's honest, the entire protocol can continue to process transactions for the period of time in which it could be attacked. And he also understood that later on, when he talked about the privacy properties of Bitcoin, he understood that this protocol, in order to actually be functional, although we've come a long way in privacy on the base chain since its release, was that this protocol had to be completely self-contained. He talks about he understanding that in the current system, when we are financially transacting, it might appear that we have a private transaction, but there's always a third party in between. That third party can choose to keep our privacy intact, or they can choose to not keep our privacy intact. Whereas this protocol, in its beauty, by existing, if you stay within the Bitcoin system and you have a new address, or he describes a new public key per transaction, that you can really maintain incredible amounts of privacy, not anonymity, or you can maintain incredible amounts of anonymity by not or pseudo anonymity by not interacting outside of the Bitcoin protocol. But as soon as you selectively reveal yourself to any other third party, whether it be an exchange or an individual you're transacting with, there is a potential for a privacy leak. But the fact that he dedicated an entire section to both the incentives to privacy and also to the the potential, which he saw as one of the biggest attacks in terms of a reorganization chain attack, shows that he understood that at some point in the future, if this was successful, there would be adversaries, coming against it. So I think that's really important as we sort of reflect on our current state in the world, that this was born into an adversarial environment, and also is intended to continue to always exist within one.
Beautiful. I agree. And I think it is incredible how deeply sometimes it's like the more you know about something, the more you know how much you don't know and how many depths of things there are to know. It's kind of one of those things with the white paper, right? Like when you read it, you kind of, you can read it at face value and see the words. But if you don't actually have context for understanding how significant and how crucial, like literally existentially crucial, the incentive structure is, and even something like the difficulty adjustment is, you don't really appreciate how incredible it is until you actually start to understand that yourself, which is usually, well, at least in my experience, was like a very far along thing. And yeah, Dan, you noticed the white paper on the background. I think you said the 95 Theses. I was like, where do I have those? But this white paper came from a girl in Argentina. She's 19, and I came across her on Nostr, and basically I bought this from her because her story was when she was born. Actually, give me 2 seconds. I just want to see what she actually wrote. I have her letter right here. Give me 1 second. I didn't plan on that, but when she was born, so this is one section of this handwritten letter that she wrote me, because I basically spent 220 sats on this because I knew it was going to someone who understood Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was extremely important for, because she kind of told her story. And part of her letter, she says, I'm a young Argentinian. I don't know what it feels like to live in a country without inflation. When I was born, you could buy a US dollar with 3 Argentinian pesos. Now you need 1,000 pesos to buy $1. So the peso has lost 99.7% of its value during my lifetime. And how does this impact our lives? Well, prices change every day, and they're always higher, never lower. So that's just like one little sort of real life example of how when money, and I don't actually think Argentina is fundamentally different than the United States or than Canada. I think they're just way further along the curve. And I think mathematically, all of these political currencies that don't have a tether to reality kind of end up there. But yeah, I just realized that having the white paper somewhere where I cross every day will make me appreciate it more. And it has so far. So thanks for noticing that, Dan. Our third speaker is Santosh. And he's a Bitcoin educator. He is the person behind studentofbitcoin.com, I believe. Let me know if I screwed that up. I don't think I did. And yeah, so let's hear what you have to say about the white paper, because I heard you talk on our recent Bitcoin consultant call, and you're just a really thoughtful guy. And I looked at your resources, and I love learning from people who just have deep knowledge of Bitcoin and are doing the work of sharing it with others and teaching others. Because I think to teach something, you have to understand it deeply. So Santosh, the stage is yours, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Caribou, for having me. Big shout out for Affinity 21 for hosting this event. Glad to meet Dan and Luke. I'll definitely hit you guys up on Twitter soon, or sorry, X. The white paper. So, you two have touched on it. Because I know it's going third, I wanted to take a different approach and really talk about sort of the adoption, or more so the perspective of how does a student approach the white paper. And the white paper played a pivotal role in my journey in Bitcoin, and it really made me realize that I wanted to be a student of this subject. When I discovered Bitcoin many years ago, the white paper seemed to have this mythical status. Like, you listen to a podcast, white paper. You read an article, white paper. You watch a video, hey, did you read this white paper? It was everywhere. So a couple of months in, I knew I had to read it. So I printed it, sat down, got my highlighters, my pencils ready. And within the second page, when I got to digital signatures, I'm like, you know what? This isn't going to be as easy as I thought it was, because what the hell is a hash of signing it from the previous transaction even mean? And as I got through each section, I had to read more, see more videos, watch more articles, and it just kept going on and on and on. And what really stuck with me was that I found this urge to learn and understand what it was all about, and a deep desire that I'd lost in my university days. And Luke, you mentioned about engineers. Yes, we love to keep it simple, stupid. And the white paper, although is simple in nature, it can get very complex in certain sections. So as I just tried to distill this information, take down notes, it ultimately led me to create the pseudonym Student of Bitcoin. And over the years, I've taken countless visual notes on this topic. So imagine colors, drawings, and minimal text. That's sort of like my style of note taking. And I made it all available for free because I believe in open source education. Why am I mentioning all this? Well, the white paper, as simple as it can be for certain individuals, is not exactly the most approachable document for many others. And for us to really make Bitcoin sort of ever present, we need to ensure that we reduce the barrier to entry for the white paper. And I've always thought about this and I hadn't really put it to the test. So yesterday, my brother just landed in Egypt to visit us. And I went to my brother, showed him the original white paper, and I said, give this a read. He is a chemical engineer. He looks at schematics all day. So I didn't think it'd be too complicated. His reaction was, you know what? I'll do this later. I'm not in the right mood. I need to take notes, and let's do it tomorrow. I said, fair enough. I handed him my visual notes. So it's the white paper that's distilled in a visual manner. And I'm like, would you want to read this? He said, sure, let me take a look. 20 minutes later, he had gone through my notes and I asked what he'd learned. He said, well, you said there's this thing called proof of work. There's this timestamp thing. You're announcing transactions publicly. And there was also this thing about the drawing with like the angel and the attacker, where if the angel controls more power, they secure the network. And he was really referring to the amounts of energy that the honest nodes are controlling. And I was quite surprised with the information he retained because it proved my sentiment towards the white paper, which is if we can make it easier for people to consume this information, we're just going to get more people understanding what the white paper is all about, because everyone learns differently. You've got auditorial learners, you've got visual learners, and you've got learners that need to actually do it. So they need to explain what the white paper is to someone else. So my feedback to someone that is actually looking to learn and read the white paper is, first and foremost, know that it's going to take you time. It's going to take some effort, and you need to be patient. Start with some kind of summary, take a simplified version, a podcast, a video, an article. Print the white paper, go through it slowly, research the relevant topics that are new. Cryptography may not make sense, Merkle trees may not make sense. Take notes, write questions. And I've learned the best teaching tool and learning tool is really trying to explain it to others. If you can't explain a concept to someone else, it's unlikely that you understand it. So if you are able to explain Bitcoin in its rudimentary fashion after reading the white paper, you're progressing in that journey. And, you two mentioned it briefly about certain sort of specifics that were excluded from the white paper. The term blockchain is not mentioned. 10-minute block intervals are not mentioned. Difference in nodes, whether it's mining or full node, the 21 cap. And the network has come a really long way. And I find it very funny because sometimes I tell people, your funds can be accessed through these 12 words known as a seed word or a private key. And sometimes I get the reaction, wait, what? 12 words? Why can't I just have one word? That's what passwords are, right? I don't want 12 words. And little do they know, before we had BIP39, it was this extremely long alphanumeric string of characters, which made it even more difficult to take self-custody, but we've improved, we've iterated. So I'll talk more about self-custody when we get that section. Call me crazy, but the white paper being titled Electronic Cash System, to me, that has always meant Bitcoin needs to be used. And right now, we associate Bitcoin with the words buy, sell, and hold. And the day we start hearing the words earn and spend more, it'll act as a great marker for Bitcoin adoption and the sentiment for the community as a whole. And it's going to take time. And I hate to say this, going the example that Caribou you mentioned, the streets held this little whiteboard that said, Bitcoin, ask me.
Sorry, I'm muted. You kind of got a little bit blurry. I don't know if it was just for me or someone else, but you said, I hate to say it, and then it kind of slowed down. So if you pick up right then, you're good.
I hate to say, it was about pain. So it's relating to the girl in Argentina. And earlier this year, I hit the streets. I had this little whiteboard. It said Bitcoin messages. One day I went out with free Bitcoin penny. The other day was Bitcoin ask me anything. And I just tried iterating with different messages to see how strangers on the streets perceive Bitcoin. And very quickly, I learned people in Canada don't give a shit. And they don't have any willingness to learn. And there is no openness. So my hypothesis there was maybe being robbed 2 to 6% doesn't seem too bad. Maybe robbery at a higher scale is when the eyes will open. So I'm sort of on a Bitcoin pilgrimage with my wife right now. We just went through Jordan, we're in Egypt, and it's insane to see how open people are when there's an economic crisis in their hands and they're seeking an alternative. And I don't like economic pain being the catalyst for Bitcoin conversations, but unfortunately, that seems to be the case. And that got me wondering, if the white paper wasn't released in 2008 during the recession, would it have been perceived the same way? I'm not sure. I don't have an answer. Maybe not. But I do believe that we may not have progressed to the current stage that we're at. We would have moved at a slower rate given when it was actually released with the timing of the recession. All to say, I'm just excited for the future. The past 15 years has been such rapid development. And if we're comparing to internet when it was 15 years, I believe web pages were just being invented. And when I first came across the internet 30 years ago, it was Windows 95, a dial-up connection, and now it's everywhere. Everything we do has the internet. So we're in for a wild journey, and I'm excited to see how Bitcoin evolves in the next 30 years. And I'm just glad that we were all alive to see this white paper released and be part of this technological revolution.
Amen. That was magical. Thank you, Santosh. Those are awesome insights. And yeah, I always love, it's like, I realize that I'm not going to think about what you guys say because, I just want to make sure we get everything said. But when I listen to this a second time, it'll be interesting to hear these things that you guys are saying, because all these perspectives are like kind of like angles that I hadn't come at it from. So just to note, that piece of art on X, it is Bianca BTC Art. If you want to support her or check out what she does, and she is in Argentina. So thank you everyone for, Luke, Dan, Santosh, for your insights on the white paper. And if you're listening to this and you haven't read the white paper, maybe pause this right now, read the white paper. You can access it online, it's open source. Print it off, even better. And set a reminder on your calendar to read it every day this year. Even better. Because I think most of the time, the only thing missing from a behavior getting done is a prompt. It's not because we don't want to, it's because we forget. And setting a prompt on my calendar is how I make sure I get things done. And I think it works for a lot of people. So for the second half of today, we're going to talk about a really important element of the Bitcoin ethos, which is self-custody, this notion of taking on full responsibility for handling and managing your own private keys. And so each speaker is going to share self-custody insights. I expect they'll be very different because of the different backgrounds people come from. And specifically, I think a question I'm always curious about is, why is self-custody important as a Bitcoiner? Because it's one thing to have people understand why they should start putting some of their time and energy into a sound form of money, but it seems to be a big obstacle and something difficult. Everyone takes their own journey to self-custody, and I'm always just curious as to how we can lower the obstacle to self-custody so that more people can be interested in it, and more people not just interested, but actually more confident custodying their own wealth than the confidence most people have by giving it that responsibility to someone else, because they actually don't acknowledge the true risk. And I agree with what you said, Santosh. I think coming from the world of health, I've noticed one of the biggest truths that I found is people learn through pain or through curiosity. And the reality is most people aren't that curious. And the ones who are, a lot of those people just are on such a fiat, are so deeply in the fiat spell, they don't have time to actually explore their curiosity. And so it's kind of this juxtaposition sometimes where until you store your time in scarce money, you might not have time to pursue your curiosity. But in this case, being curious can actually avoid you a huge amount of pain. So Luke, You work with people as a Bitcoin advisor, and you help them understand the importance of self-custody and to sort of gain the ability to confidently manage their keys collaboratively or independently. So I'd love to hear your perspective of you doing this work, and also just any sort of cheat codes that you have from your own personal experience navigating the self-custody sort of trail. So go for it. 10 minutes. It's all yours.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, first regarding pain and what was said about Argentina, I fully agree with that. Right before, well, earlier today, I was talking I've recorded a podcast earlier today with a gentleman I had just met from Argentina, and it's the same thing. Bitcoin adoption there is far beyond where it is here in the United States, but we're still talking like 0.5%, way less than 1%, right? So I think the pain message is really, really clear. I think as much as I'm a moon boy, as people call me online, I'm much more quote unquote pessimistic on the timeline. I think it's gonna be a very long time. I think it's gonna be years of normalcy, quote unquote, and then another leg down, massive pain, kind of like we saw in 2020, 2021. Then a few more years of normal and down again. I think it's just gonna be that stair step down and down and down. Some areas probably more like a cliff, but I think most people are only gonna learn about this through pain. Unfortunately, people are not willing to consider the alternate to their pain at 2% inflation or 2% pain. They're not willing to consider it 4%, 6%, 8% pain. And we've seen in Argentina, even at 100% pain or 100% inflation, people will still have a very hard time understanding Bitcoin. Although they do faster, and they do faster by like a 2x, 5x, 10x multiplier, but still one way or the other, it's going to take a long time. And that gets right to self-custody. I think perhaps the better metric of determining how far is Bitcoin adoption. I think it's better than the surveys. I think it's better than how many people bought it on exchange. I think the better way is how many people are taking self-custody, as it was wonderfully pointed out, earn and spend versus buy and sell. I think these are much better metrics for how many people have adopted Bitcoin. And that's very early, right? There's only 4 or 5 million addresses with over a tenth of a Bitcoin. So it's like, hopefully every single person watching this has at least a tenth of a Bitcoin in some form of cold storage or self-custody, right? So that's really critical. And I know this segues very well to your point of your conversation, but it is really important. As you said, I do work at the Bitcoin Advisor, Peter Dunworth's company. He's been doing this 7 years. We're the longest in the business. Frankly, we have very little competition. We've not a single client has ever lost a sat of ours. We help companies, we help individuals, we help charities, churches, all of that. And so it's a thrill. I love it. I've been talking with Peter since February about this, and I think it's critical because I think most people, including Bitcoiners, perhaps a lot of people watching this, know they should take self-custody. They hear people talk about all the time, but they think they have time. They think they can figure it out. And my message, I repeat again and again and again, I pound the table, is that we may have less time than we think because, okay, if you want a hot wallet, if you want a cold wallet, if you want a single sig, multi-sig, whatever, it's like, what do you think is going to happen when half the people interested in Bitcoin, only half the people interested in Bitcoin, and I think that's optimistic, have taken self-custody. The other half haven't. They've still got their sats on whatever exchange. Okay. And then all the number of people interested in Bitcoin goes up by a factor of 10. It's like, what do you think happens there? Like, what do you think is going to happen to Cold Card? What do you think is going to happen to Trezor? What do you think is going to happen to Blockstream, Jades? And like you're not going to be able to order a hardware wallet. It's like, I mean, I in my other businesses and just life, it's like, it takes forever for me to get my car fixed at the mechanic. It takes forever for me to get a plumber. It takes forever for anything to ever get done. And it's like, I don't think most Bitcoiners have truly thought through the urgency of this. Is that right now it feels like we have plenty of time. Like, oh yeah, maybe we have 3 years, but in 6 months it might feel like we have a year and a half. It's like coins are being drained from exchanges for the first time since 2020, like net, right? So we have not even begun. We have literally, as bullish as we all are, we have literally not begun to feel the true scarcity impact of Bitcoin on US denominated price, right? And this is something my friend and partner at the Bitcoin Advisor, Peter Dunworth, talks about, is like the rate at which this could hyper accelerate. Just most people are not considering that. in price, and everyone gets bullish about that. But it's like everything's a trade-off. You can be hyper bullish about that, but for all the Bitcoiners and all the people that do not have their self custody down, it's going to be really painful because you're going to wake up and realize, oh wait, I need to like cancel everything, figure out my self custody now. Oh wait, I heard that Luke guy talking on that one show back on Bitcoin Whitepaper Day, and I didn't reach out to him. I didn't order my hardware wallet. I didn't do all these things because I thought I had time. And now, oh crap, Luke's booked out 3 months. I mean, like I'm literally booked out till the end of November right now. We're recording this October 31st, and we're at 3-year bear market lows. And the vast majority of people hitting me up are individuals. It's like, and our team has tripled in the last like couple months here. It's like the demand is so strong for self custody. I think FTX really accelerated this. I think the ETF is really accelerating this. And so my rambling point here to people is whatever you're doing, figure it out now. Don't rush. Take your time, slow and steady, but start moving on that track now because I, I'm on the inside of that self custody multi sig world. I'm talking to these people. I'm hearing their questions. We're having those conversations, and the last few months since February, it's just hyper accelerating. And even though it's a small nominal percentage now, the same way with Bitcoin adoption, I was saying at the beginning of my point here about Argentina. It's like right now there's not a self custody urgency crisis of it hitting the fan, but the rate at which it's accelerating. It's like if we go out another year or 2 years at this rate, plus the halving, plus QE, plus lowering rate, it's like all the reasons you're bullish for next cycle are on the flip side reasons why you should be seriously considering your self custody now. So anyway, that's my larger, more altruistic point to people is to really be thinking that seriously. I'm sure the other two guys will talk more about specific tips or tricks. But I just really want to pound the urgency because a lot's happening and a lot's developing behind the scenes really quickly, and it's really exciting. Like I love it. Like literally 10, 12 hours a day, I'm doing multi-sig stuff, with the Bitcoin advisor and all that, but and elsewhere too. But anyway, it's so exciting and it's changing so fast, and it's going to be both thrilling and terrifying. And I just hope people get their coins off exchanges because, we've seen it with gold, we've seen it with everything else. It's going to be really quick. So yeah. So anyway, enough about that. My role at the Bitcoin advisor. What we do is we do collateral custody, multi-sig vaults for people. So essentially, we help the client set up their own multi-sig vault. It's really intimidating for people, and we help them either with a 3-key or very soon a 4-key setup. We help them set up their vault to what makes them comfortable, right? So the client has a key, we have a key, other custodians or key agents have their own keys, and we basically help them so that in the event of them losing their keys and they're forgetting where they place their keys, and someone taking their keys, $5 wrench attack, a 6102 attack, on and on and on, all the dozens of internal and external threats. We basically work with the client to help them diversify and help them consider all the trade-offs, positive and negative, to various key setups, single sig, multi-sig, whatever. And a big part of that too is jurisdictional arbitrage. A lot of our clients like to have 3 keys in 3 different countries, like ultimate security. That's our number one objective, number one priority. And so it's a lot of fun. So, if people want to check out the Bitcoin advisor, they can just Google the Bitcoin advisor with ER. If they want to talk to me, they can just do Bitcoin advisor / Luke Broyles, Broyles. And we give out dozens of pages of free self-custody education. The first consultation with me is free. It's a blast. I love it. I love my job. It's literally helping people. My job is literally to drain the exchanges, right? 6, 8, 10 hours a day. I'm helping people take their coins off exchanges, and I'm watching it real time, the exchanges being drained. So please, whether you use Bitcoin Advisor or not, you do your own thing or not, whatever, just do it because it's happening.
It's like that part in The Big Short where Steve Carell's like, "It's happening, it's happening,"
Yeah.
and it's like
it's happening, and it's not because most people don't realize it's happening, but under the scenes, it's happening. It's happening like literally right before this call. I was looking at the chart of our company, all of our metrics of the rate of acceleration. It's crazy. So people are figuring it out. The ETF stuff's really making the smart people think. So do it.
not your keys, not your coins. And yeah, shit happens way quicker than you think. It's almost like the metaphor I often use and that I kind of feel sometimes is like all us Bitcoiners are out on this boat and we're out like deep ocean out, and we have a seismograph, and a tectonic blast just happened in the middle of the ocean. The seismograph came up and said like the biggest tsunami. Nobody has seen a tsunami this big because it's never happened before, but it just started, and you're at the epicenter, and you're the only people that know. And it's almost like we've come to shore somehow. We've hyper warped to shore, and we're like, hey, we just saw this thing that just happened out there, and some really crazy stuff is coming. So you should all move inland, do all the things, which is like, you should all self-custody because there's a tsunami coming. And when it hits, you're not going to be able to get the hardware device because there's not going to be anything left. Or there will be things left, but it's going to be so obliterated. It's going to take a long time to rebuild. And so you must do this now before the thing comes, because when it comes, you can't do it then.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thing, that sorry for going over, but
it's okay.
People think of these things individually. They don't combine them together. It's like you won't be able to order with a hardware wallet, and transaction fees will be exponentially higher because now you're competing with high net worth individuals and companies, and the exchanges are going under, and inflation is probably worse than it's ever been, and this, and this, and this, and you can't. I mean, it's like everyone at Swan all the time is going to be sucked away. Everyone at the Bitcoin Advisor all the time is going to be sucked away. Unchained all the time. It's like all these things will happen at once, in my opinion. I don't think it'll be a cliff. Like I said, I do think it'll be stair step. But there'll be periods of 6-9 months probably where I think it's incredibly difficult. Then you'll have a couple years reorient, but I think it'll be a volatile Bitcoin adoption. But ultimately, on the other side, everyone's self-sovereign, and it's a bright future. So yeah, I'm excited.
Agreed. So do it now, and don't make excuses because they might come bite you in the ass. Dan, you don't actively. I mean, Dan's an emergency room medicine doctor. He's an emergency room doctor. So from what I know, you don't teach self-custody all day. But I actually think that the just normal people who have their work in another industry actually have often, from what I've learned from Bitcoiners that I know, have valuable insights to share about self-custody, because it's almost like we all have no choice but to learn about self-custody to some extent. And so it's not just the people who are helping others self-custody. It's also just like the average person who has navigated their self-custody journey often has cool insights to share. So Dan, it's all yours. Would love to hear your thoughts on self-custody and any experiences related to your journey.
Yeah, we make, I think all of the educators do a great job of laying out a lot of the options, but we all make self-custody way too complicated for people that make it seem mentally burdensome. Self-custody is the easiest thing in the world, and everyone should do it because it allows you to learn how to use Bitcoin. If you don't want to learn how to use Bitcoin, you probably shouldn't buy Bitcoin or earn Bitcoin or trade your goods for Bitcoin, and you wouldn't be because you would have no interest in Bitcoin. So self-custodying Bitcoin is using Bitcoin, and that is sort of the first step, is wanting to use it. And the next step is basically the easiest step in the world. It involves either choosing the platform you're going to self-custody on to start, not with thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but with a small amount of money. Do you want to start on your desktop? Well, then there's some very easy desktop wallets you can use. Do you want to just use it on your phone? It's probably a more secure device than most people's desktop computer. You simply download Blue Wallet, you get your transaction, you get your address, you receive a small amount of funds, and you write down 12 words, 24 words. And then you treat that with respect. I think most of the horror stories you hear about people losing Bitcoin are from times in which they simply maybe did not respect what they had. They, thought it was worth 15 cents, even though they had 15,000 Bitcoin, and they lost their computer, or they had no idea that Bitcoin would move to, even $35,000, and they, threw away their public key address or lost it or didn't write it down. And then after you just have it written down, you have it stored in a secure place, and you think about it and you realize that it may have substantial value, you then begin to investigate more secure ways of storing those words. Whether that is etching those words onto steel, whether that is using a hardware device, which is certainly not necessary and should not be any encumbrance, even in the most dire circumstances, to start self-custodying. There's no need to buy $100 treasure at first. You just simply use a software wallet and you learn to do single sig ownership of your keys, and you learn how to receive a transaction, and you use the wallet to send a transaction. And then you can begin to investigate many of the other much more secure, but much also more challenging ways of learning how to transact and store your Bitcoin, which can involve multi-sig, which can involve a hardware wallet, which can involve passphrases, which can involve geographic separation, but never have to, and certainly should not be a deterrent for self-custodying your very first transaction.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think we do often hype it up, even with words like multi-sig, like that's a beautiful feature to have, but it's not, it's an advanced feature. And like, I didn't get to multi-sig until like, probably like 4 years into, custodying my own keys for the first time. Like it's not and it's funny because now that I say that, it's like, back then the actual technological options were very unintuitive, and as a non-technical person it was more effort for me. But now it's like literally you're having multi-sig now. When we use Nunchuck for the Canadian truckers, like it was the most intuitive process I've ever done, and I was like, this is tremendous, and this is such an upgrade to the user experience and a lowering of barriers, really. And so you can only imagine in a year from now what kind of apps, literally open source apps, we're going to be able to get on our mobile devices that give us some of the most secure ways to store our own keys and to take sovereignty over our funds. And unfortunately, I think this is so similar where, curiosity or pain, right? Same thing. It's like sometimes you got to get rugged to get your self-custody act in gear. And the hope is that when people have funds taken or stolen or funds that they can't access, that they learn the lesson, right? And they learn that, okay, well, next time it could have been way worse because it could have been all my Bitcoin. Maybe it wasn't all my Bitcoin, or maybe it was early in my Bitcoin journey. But it seems like losing a bit of Bitcoin or realizing the risk of not taking full self-custody is kind of what some people need. And, the hope with pieces of events like this or content online is to stimulate a bit more curiosity so that people do the hard thing before the hard thing can't be done in a short enough time for them to do what it's supposed to do. And it's almost, Tour de Meester has a great report, and in there he basically says, like, right now we have the ability to buy portfolio insurance for our life's wealth, even though the proverbial kitchen is already smoking. Like, usually when your house is on fire, you can't buy fire insurance. We have this unique moment where, like, we already see that the house is on fire, and yet we have this lifeline. We click a few buttons and we can get house insurance to cover us for a disaster that has already started, if we're looking deep enough or just smelling, just smell the air. So yeah, I think that resonates with me. It's a journey. I think it has to just be a practice where you literally just have to have a practice. Like Saturday is for studying Satoshi's paper. That's what it is for me. So it's like, if I tried to chew off a full multi-sig setup in one morning, it would probably be really intimidating. I'd probably never do it. But if I just chew away at like one small element and take a note on one micro element of what a multi-sig is and learn about it, I get more comfortable. There's less barriers. I'm chipping away at the work, creating my own blockchain of work every 7th day. And eventually it becomes something that's very intuitive. And actually, for me, it made me realize, like, it was so silly that I didn't do this earlier, because the risk of not having this when I truly need it, when it's really important, now seems like a risk I shouldn't have taken in hindsight. So hopefully we can convey that with this event. So Santosh, you're up next. Thanks for that, Dan. That was awesome. Thanks, Luke. Santosh, you're up 10 minutes and then we'll wrap it up.
Thanks, Caribou. Luke, you brought up something that I haven't really thought about the urgency of self-custody. And it's quite alarming as I sort of think through what could potentially come down the path for us next year and the year after. But yes, supply chains for these hardware wallets are not going to be ready. People are going to be caught off guard. So my sort of insights were not in line with the urgency, but I do agree with it. I was sort of more in line with Dan about the journey aspect. So I am aligned that people need to get their crap in order so they're not caught flat-footed. But I do want to say that as Bitcoiners, we sometimes overcomplicate what is needed for an individual based on their needs. And most of my perspective is it's aligned with adoption, because I spent a decade of my career helping organizations adopt technology, and now I just want to help them adopt Bitcoin. And no one starts off with a multi-sig, running their own node, steal backup, and whatnot. So I wanted to share a story. Earlier this year, I convinced my barber to accept Bitcoin. And the first app I had him download before everyone panics, it was Wallet of Satoshi. And I know it's not self-custody. And the reason I do that, because Wallet of Satoshi is the only app right now that goes from, yes, I will accept Bitcoin, to accepting Bitcoin in almost less than 30 seconds. You go to App Store, you download Wallet of Satoshi, you click start, you click receive, you've got Bitcoin. There isn't writing seed words, there isn't writing you don't have to click any other additional dialog boxes to receive Bitcoin. So I made it very clear to my barber, listen, this is just the first app. Next time I come to you, we'll upgrade this app, but register your email with this app. He said, okay. 3 weeks later, I went for my next haircut. I actually convinced him to give a 5% discount for anyone that pays in Bitcoin. So that was a win. But then we moved his app, or we moved the sats from Wallet of Satoshi to Moon, because now it was his second payment. I didn't want it in Wallet of Satoshi anymore. So we moved it to Moon, and I made it clear this time, okay, now you're starting to take self-custody. We'll explain more about that as we continue this journey. But now you need to make sure you go through the security aspect of this app and go through the backup process, your email, and write down your code. So the next time I came, so this is the third visit, I made sure it was backed up. I made sure he had it written down in 2 different places. And he was aware what the consequences would be if he lost those words or that backup. I'm no longer in the country, so he sends me an update once a month on how he's progressing with Bitcoin payments. But because Moon isn't standard Lightning or true Lightning, I do need to upgrade the app that he's using. But as passionate Bitcoiners, it's so easy to be like, yeah, you should do this extreme setup. And is that really needed for a $30 haircut? No. Some will argue maybe. But now, if you're planning on securing Bitcoin for your business or employees, which Luke is clearly working on a daily basis, what do you do then? So a farmer that used to sell me meat in exchange for Bitcoin once in our meetup came to me and said, hey, can you help me with the cold card? And I said, absolutely, I'll help you with the cold card. So he came over one day, we set up his Sparrow wallet on desktop, we exported the npub, we received and sent funds all in an air gap fashion using Sparrow and cold card. A little extreme for the barber, but not so much for the farmer and his needs. 2 months later, he messages me and he says, I kind of need help with the node. Can you help me out? I may bring another farmer friend. And I said, sure. So I had 2 farmers in my living room. We are pulling apart this refurbished PC, putting in a 2 terabyte SSD, and looking to install StartOS. They came into my home having basic computer skills, and they left being able to troubleshoot their BIOS. All to say that this was just another step in their self-custody journey. Next, they said, you know what? We want to get a Blockstream receiver set up because we don't want to be reliant on our local ISP. We want to be connected to a satellite so that if there are any issues with the internet, with our local provider, we have a backup. So self-custody is really an evolution based on someone's exposure to Bitcoin and how much they're learning. So if, let's say we didn't have the concept of a bank, I came to you and gave you $10,000. You know, Caribou, you're not going to walk around with $10,000 in your wallet. What do? You put $100 in your wallet, maybe a couple $100 in a cupboard. And if you have a safe, you put the remaining $9,700 in the safe. Similarly with Bitcoin, maybe $10 is okay with Wallet of Satoshi. If it increases, put that in a Phoenix. That's self-custody. $1,000, maybe a hardware wallet. Hundreds of $1,000s, maybe multi-sig. You know, some that hear this might be like, wow, I can't believe this person's mentioning Wallet of Satoshi. But you have to realize adoption occurs in stages. You know, you can't overwhelm an individual because it'll just put them off. You can't start off someone saying, hey, let me give you a Bitcoin penny, but you have to write these 12 words down before I give you this Bitcoin penny. It's impractical to think that that individual will go through the pain of writing the 12 words down to get 1 Satoshi. Some might, but a majority of them are not going to because it's a hindrance for that single Bitcoin penny that they're receiving. And, you know, Dan mentioned on this too, that we need to make it easier for individuals to actually self-custody. And I believe there's a fear involved with this. And it's really interesting to see because humans feel like we're responsible enough to drive around in metal vehicles that can kill people. We have children, we raise children. We explore new geographies without much. But when it comes to money, we are sort of reliant on a third party and a middleman to hold this value on our behalf. Why is that? And I don't have a direct answer aside from the fact that we've pretty much lived in society where centuries we've had this middleman who we could leave our funds with. But how do we address this fear? Well, first we need to normalize that we are okay to protect our own wealth, and we are responsible to do so. We need to treat self-custody as a step function. If you only have 10,000 sats, do you need a hardware wallet? No. But as you grow, as you learn, you're going to need a hardware wallet. We're also going to need unique self-custody solutions. And I don't think we haven't really, I'm sure as the pain increases, more innovation will occur in this space. I haven't personally played around with border wallets, but it visualizes your, out of the bit 2048 words in a grid that you can visualize. This was very interesting. A friend in Namibia told me that he's heard mothers make the seed words into a lullaby and sing it to their babies. So now imagine this, you've taken something so complicated and you've made a song out of it, and now you're singing it to your baby who's going to remember the song forever. And only the baby and the mom is going to know. And this is going to protect this child's future wealth in such a simple manner. My personal journey as well, it didn't start with the multi-sig setup, with steel backups, with name the way to do it. My first exchange was actually Quadriga, which was like blown up in Canada. Fortunately, I moved my funds before that complete fiasco. And we all will agree, not your keys, not your coins. There are just levels to how secure your keys are. And we need to be aware at the stage that the other party is in and provide advice accordingly. And I'm a culprit, I am a hypocrite because sometimes I've overprescribed a self-custody method for someone that's not ready for it. But also, if we all strive to sort of piecemeal self-custody, it'll provide a better experience for everyone going down the rabbit hole. And given the timelines that we're at, I probably will echo what Luke said, which is, yes, you can piecemeal it, but there is a little bit of urgency of that piecemealing. So get on that journey now.
Awesome. Thank you, Santosh. That was awesome. Side note, I have a broke down laptop. I need to learn how to navigate my BIOS because those are some advanced ass farmers you just spoke about, and it's making me feel like my tech game is weak right now. And I will also say that I also start with Wallet of Satoshi for like one of my favorite softest orange pills is a 21 sat tip. So I go a couple of times a week, I go buy this like a scratch made cookie at a local business and I tip her 21 sats and she's so excited. Like each time I do it and she sees the amount go up and she realizes, like the first time we did, I'll never forget. She was like, well, when do I have to give my ID? You don't. Well, when do I have to sign up with my email? You don't. I was like, you own 21 units of the world's best money. You didn't have to ask permission. No one knows you have it except for me and you. And that just got her very, like a seed was planted in that moment where she cannot unsee that. She cannot unexperience it. And now she has family, I believe, in Southeast Asia. And I know that, I'm pretty sure she sends money back there. And I bet you she's paying a shitload of fees to do that. And I bet you on the other side, there was all this KYC and nonsense. And so it gets, I always make sure to say that, Wallet of Satoshi is for your pocket change. Anything more than that, you probably want to have it more secure because if your phone gets smashed or hacked, that's gone too. So the next step is to have a backup so that if something happens to your phone, you still have the Bitcoin. And inevitably, I think one thing I've seen is that people must have the amount of wealth to justify the level of effort with their self-custody complexity. So if someone has 10,000 sats, they're not going to spend 50 hours understanding what multi-sig is, right? But when they have 100,000, fiat dollars worth of Bitcoin, it's like they develop this innate need, usually through anxiety or through worry about the fact that their Bitcoin might not be safe, to say that's the nudge to say you should probably elevate your self-custody security. And so I think it just comes with the amount of wealth you have in Bitcoin, or the amount of purchasing power in Bitcoin that you have is a direct nudge to upgrading your self-custody strategy to align with something that you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be super advanced, but it's what we all have our own risk tolerances. And I think with self-custody, my favorite heuristic to remember is that there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. And the more your circumstances change, the more you have to reevaluate trade-offs. And the only constant is change, because the world is changing. You know, your perceived sense of certainty in the future is changing. So no solutions, only trade-offs, and regularly evaluating those trade-offs as the world changes is probably a good idea. So that is it for our scheduled programming. We are on time, which is always nice. So thank you, Luke, Dan, and Santosh for being here. And thank you to everyone who's listening. If you enjoyed this event, you can zap sats to Finny21 on Nostr, or you can boost sats to this podcast episode using Fountain. And all the boosts to this podcast and the zaps sent to Finny21 with the message 1031 are going to be used for the Genesis event, which is our next event that we're going to do on Jan 3, 2024. And so if you want to support that event or speak at that event or attend live, because we might do some sort of live event portion of it, just DM Finny21 on Nostr. And if you go to finny21.com, you'll be able to see our Nostr public key. And if you don't know what Nostr is, maybe a good moment for you to be able to see what a decentralized form of social media looks like in a communication protocol that's layered on the internet that has the features of Bitcoin, but with informational communication that actually harmonizes really well with the Bitcoin protocol of value communication. So the long-term plan with these actually is to eventually do these white paper events in person. So the hope is that people enjoy these, we can get people donating or supporting and do them in person. I think that would be a lot of fun. So thank you to Finny21 for sponsoring this session so that we could compensate these speakers for their time and the people who are putting energy into putting this on all the platforms. Like I said, our next event is a Genesis block event on Jan 3, 2024. And you can just send Finny21 a DM on Nostr if you're curious about that. So wishing you all a really wonderful day. I know it won't be white paper when most people watch this. It won't be white paper day when most people watch this, but October 31 hopefully has a different meaning for you now, and maybe a good excuse to read the white paper each year and maybe do a big revisit of your self-custody. So wishing you all a great day and lots of love.